Okay, so we finished with part four, and we're going to work on the last couple questions on this. Question four on part two. I have extra sheets here because I've been doing some scratch work. This is actually the third time I've recorded this, which is very annoying. But I'm going to try to stay excited about talking about this topic because that's what you need, is my enthusiasm and excitement. So, the first question is for standard purchases, what's the APR on this credit card? And the answer is inside of the statement. And I just want to point out that the interest rates here are interesting because there's different interest rates for different types of charges. That's actually very significant. Sometimes a bank will try to like lure you into a balance transfer for a credit card, get you with a really low APR, but then the purchases stay at the same APR, and then they pay off the low interest things first, and the high interest things just sit there. Happened to me before. Anyways, so to answer this question, I'm focusing on purchases. So that means that I need to put in 19.49%. We talked, I don't know if we talked in the first module. Usually we get to this talking about rounding and talking about how to talk about numbers. If I was saying these numbers out loud, I probably wouldn't read every single digit. I might say 19.5% for purchases and 30% for the bank cash advances. And that's just a normal part of communicating with numbers, because if I give you too much information, your eyes kind of glaze over and you're like, what's happening? All right. So now I want to talk about proportional reasoning, which is this next question. That credit cards usually look at compounding daily because they want to make as much money as possible. It's actually more complicated how they calculate their interest for the month. They do a average daily balance charge, but we're gonna use this compound daily concept. And to do this question, which I'm not going to show you how to do it, I'm going to tell you about the concept and then see if you can figure it out. So I want to talk about proportional reasoning. This is what you need to understand in order to answer that question. So let's say you have an insurance fee of $354, and that's for half of the year. And so it might occur to you to say, how much is that per month? Or, maybe the insurance company is going to charge you monthly and you don't have to think about it, but we're going to go ahead and see if we can answer that question. So the way that I would kind of set up a scaffolding to think about it, maybe you already have an intuition about what to do, but I know 6 months is $354. I'm going to make this money. And I'm wondering about 1 month, and I don't know how much that is. But I notice that basically I'm scaling this down by a factor of 6. So that's what I'm going to do here. And this gets back to the skill of proportional reasoning. So here I would just say, well, I'll take this number and I'll divide it by 6. So that's taking something that's 6 months or half of a year and cutting it into 6 equal pieces. So now let's think about another situation. I pay $56 a year for math teachers are awesome. And I want to know, well, what is that costing me every month? And so for a yearly situation, I know that that's 12 months and it's costing me $56. And then I want to go down to 1 month and I want to know how much money that is. So notice that I changed 1 year into 12 months to help me see what the scaling factor is, because the 1 year is in a different unit. So I want to know what it is in months so that I can see, I just need to divide this by 12. And when I do that, make this money, I should get an answer that makes sense to me. It's going to be smaller because I'm breaking this $56 into 12 equal pieces. There's some rounding going on here, because if I did 467 times 12, I don't think I'd get back to 56, but I'd be pretty close. So that's an example of scaling down. And proportional reasoning is really just scaling down and scaling up. Sometimes I want to go from, if I buy, my Starbucks every day and that's $3.50, how much am I spending over the course of the year? Sometimes that kind of thinking can help you put things into perspective, because it's like, well, this doesn't cost that much money, but if you do it every day, what is that? And then in the other direction, scaling down, right, we have all these situations where we want to take something that's annual and figure out, well, what would that be like monthly? For example, in the milestone with the budget, you have an annual salary, and then you want to cut that down into a monthly salary because we look at our budget per month. All right, I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to pause the recording, and I'm going to resume the recording. Please don't type this number into this box. You're supposed to calculate that number. One of the things you get graded for on the rubric is your process clear? So when I click on that box, I should see how did that number come to be. You can see what the answer is. It's a really tiny percent with a lot of decimals. Where does that come from? It's proportional reasoning. All right, so now we're ready to answer this question. And basically, first day of the new billing cycle, I have a balance of this. I want to know what percentage of this number would turn into. So I'm calculating. This is just a percent of question, and this is where we started last week, refreshing how to find percentages. I would point out that, if I say something like, well, what is 30% of 20? And you're like, oh, no, I know. I just do equals 30% times 20. And this process makes sense, and this answer makes sense. Sometimes when the numbers get more complicated, this is 5 digits with 2 decimals. This number is insanely big with a lot of decimals. Then you kind of lose the thread because you're like, well, I don't know what I've been moving the decimal. What's happening? This is why process matters. So, ultimately, to find the percentage of something, you just multiply. That's a beautiful thing. So that's what I did here is I just set up the cell references and I said, hey, multiply this number times this number. You also should get 53 cents. So basically, the amount of interest being charged for the very first day is 53 cents. And that leads me on to the next question, which is, okay, well, in a month, how much am I going to owe in my account? So really, there's two questions there. One is, what's the balance and what's the interest for the month? And there's a couple of ways to think about this. And I'm going to start with kind of a rough, kind of simple interest approach. And then we'll look at using this concept that it's compounding and look at how it's different. So we know the balance is the 988.21. So I'm just going to put that answer here. And then what's the interest for the month? Well, if it's 53 cents a day and there's 30 days in the month, then an easy thing to do would be to just scale this up by 30 to see what I'm at. And so then I can put these numbers together. Boom, boom. W57. And I can see, when this happens, it just means I need more digits. Okay, so this would be my total. This is my estimate just based on some rough thinking, like 53 cents a day. But the thing is, with compound interest, we know from this part that as time goes by, the interest actually increases. Now, this is pretty small amounts, 53 cents, and maybe 54 cents. So it shouldn't be wildly different. And this should be a pretty good estimate. But let's use the compound interest formula and look at it. So the compound interest formula, we take the principal, which is 988.21. That's what we borrowed, times 1 plus, and we're going to use this percentage rate because we're taking the interest rate divided by n, which is our 365, and then we're raising it to the power of 30 because 30 days have gone by. Now, in the formula that we use, you do P times 1 plus R divided by N raised to the N times T. And, this, so I kind of did this in one step here and just said 30 instead of doing N times T, which you might be confused by. But in some ways, it's harder to think about N and T in the situation. N is not hard. N is 365 because it's compound daily. But T is harder to think about because T is supposed to be measured in years, but I'm not doing a full year. I'm doing 30 days. So that's why I went straight for that. If I was thinking about it as T What is T? I would say T is 30 over 365 because I'm doing 30 days out of 365 days. And that would lead me to the same result if N is 365. Notice that this number and this number are similar. That makes me feel good. This is what we would say is technically the right answer for this question, making the assumption about the compound interest being compound daily. And you notice that it's a little bit more, 12 cents more, and that has to do with that compounding impact. So you better believe that credit card companies will try to get that extra 12 cents from. What's my APR going to become if I fail to make the minimum payment? I'm going to leave that up to you to read carefully because it says it in here. And then this one, 2,000 at that interest rate, compound daily, how much I owe after 880 days. Leave that up to you because it's very similar to how we did number 8 here. All right, I'm going to stop there, get that posted, and then we got one more sheet to do.